Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to be talking about practical EQ. So we talked a little earlier, a couple weeks ago, about EQ in general, theoretical EQ. But really what we're looking at here is how do you use it in the real world? So if you've got questions about that, go ahead and throw it into Makana. If you are not logged in, you can actually use the QR code here. So this is, just go to askofficehours.com and you can ask your question. You don't have to log in. You can just throw that question in. You can do that 24/7. So you can, if you see this show later and you have a question that comes up in your head, you can just use that URL and send a question in and we'll answer it in the coming days. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Andy Kokendorfer starts us out this morning from Viera, Florida, and he wonders, are there any Adobe MAX software releases of note?
John?
Yeah, there's two questions. Paul's got another question about this. I was going to give my little overview. We saw some really good stuff yesterday from Adobe MAX. They've got Firefly Model 2, the second version of Firefly Model 2 coming out. Adobe Express really had some really neat features in it. It's got some new 2D animation tools that look really good. And then they've got a thing that has a bunch of different templates built into it for TikTok, for Facebook, and it creates all of those images and thumbnails for you automatically. And then it's got a scheduler in it for all the social media. So you can schedule all your work directly in Express, which I thought was really cool. I didn't see a text to vector, but they do have new vector tools built into Illustrator that looked really neat. And then they did announce a text to video or a picture to video, a new audio model, and a 3D model coming very, very soon. And like I said before, prompt engineering is dying, a slow death. They showed a lot of the interfaces, a lot of the switch that you do in Midjourney built into the interfaces. So, exposure, aspect ratio, a lot of that stuff built into the interfaces. But all in all, very, very good presentation and great stuff. I think Descript is done and over.
Wow. You just because Adobe's just adding their audio, they're just
Premiere. They showed all the integration of the text editing in Premiere and some of the tools, and most everything that's in Descript now is built into Premiere.
Interesting. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida is up next, and Bobby says, does anyone know what are the features of YouTube live streaming that are included in Google Workspace?
I don't know what features there would be for YouTube Live related to Google Workspace. So maybe you can be a little more specific because I haven't heard of any that are different. The only thing that may happen is that you may have the ability to manage it. You can manage the YouTube and set up managers and so on and so forth with it. That did occur in the past, but I don't know of any specific features or any features that we would consider tangible that are specific to Google Workplace. So yeah, let us know if there's something you're looking for specifically, but I haven't seen anything in that area. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas comes up next, and this is the other one that John was mentioning before. At Adobe MAX 2023, Adobe really revealed significant advancements in the world of AI and creativity, including more realistic image generation, 3 new AI models, and enhanced AI capabilities for existing models such as Photoshop. Comment, please.
John?
Nothing to add.
Well, you already said all the things that there are to say. Yeah, so it looks like Adobe is moving probably faster than almost anybody else when it comes to image generation, and they've got the money to do it, and the researchers and so on and so forth. I think that they're still, from what I've seen, they're still, like Midjourney still, I think, is going to be ahead from the pure image quality, just because Adobe is limiting itself to what it can purchase or what it owns, and that. I think that makes sense, but I think that it keeps it behind a little bit. It's going to be really interesting. I was reading about, is it PimEyes? Have you read about, I just read an article this morning about Pim, I think it's called PimEyes. And basically you can throw any image into it of people, a crowd or whatever, select a person and it will go find them. Like it will tell you who they are. And it is it's like facial recognition at an outside edge. The challenge really is that it's hard to contain these things anymore. So whether it's ChatGPT or Midjourney or other things, it's going to, we can talk about what those things look like, but it's going to be really hard to contain those technologies. And there's a lot of people that are a little afraid of that. But there's, I guess Google had this a decade ago and they just didn't want to release it because they thought it was too dangerous.
The one cool thing that they did show yesterday, Alex, on the interfaces is you can load an image up as a reference. So rather than say in the style of Van Gogh or whatever, you can upload an image and it will copy the style of that image for your prompt.
Is that out on the beta yet?
Everything they showed yesterday is in betas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Jeff?
And I'll just add, I mean, I've been using or experimenting a little bit with the Adobe Express beta for a little while, and it's been pretty good. I haven't gone back to using Midjourney if I'm just trying to design something kind of quick off a template. Maybe it's really easy just to go into that image box, type in what you want, and you're presented similarly with options. 4 options. You could choose one of them. You can generate more, have it do it all over again, etc. And it's right there now, along with whatever else you may be doing in there, a design template, and just pop it right in.
Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask, John, those of you that are still in the Adobe world, I stepped out once they went to a subscription model. Do they still make standalone entry-level products like Adobe, like Photoshop Elements and Premiere Elements?
So they showed Adobe and Illustrator both for the web, and they're both free right now.
Really? Okay, so great. So there are free versions that you can get without licensing issues where you would have to license every single.
At least right now they're free. We'll see what happens in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and the question is, the MSG Sphere costs $2.3 billion to build, $1 billion over budget. As a project or production manager, is there a point where you know when to say when to reduce the scope or even kill a project due to out-of-control costs?
Bill?
I think that's a very complex question, and here's why. There's a couple of things going on right now that I've read about in the world. That seems like a massive amount of money, but there's a project in Southeast Asia, I think that's China has been doing, that is up somewhere around the $100 to $300 billion level. It's an entire city that they've built, and essentially it's not working, and they may have to abandon the whole thing. That level of risk that seems insane to most of us who live real lives. You're $1 billion over a budget. That's crazy. Well, there are massive scope projects that run those kind of deficits and that have those kind of risks involved. Nobody ever likes that. But I'm just, there have been massively invested movies that have gotten to the point where they were literally about to go out to audiences, and somebody in the studio says, kill it. And the whole project dies, and all those sunk costs are unrecoverable. Every huge project has its own dynamic forces that are pushing on it. My assumption has been with the MSG Sphere, they think that having a destination in Las Vegas that is a touristy town that people flock to, and some kind of a big mega facility is still going to be profitable over years. So they made that calculation and even sold off some South Strip properties, I think, in order to help them finance it. So at this level, who knows whether it was a pull the plug project or not. That's what those folks get paid a lot of money to decide.
In the bottom line, if it was worth $1 billion, it was probably worth $2.3 billion. It's just how long it takes to get the money back. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Vegas is littered with uncompleted projects, the Fontainebleau Hotel, that have sat, 3/4 finished for, a decade, that they ran out of money, or one of the investors pulls out and the project doesn't have enough money to continue to completion. That happens all the time. That's what the bankruptcy laws cater to, and large corporations can write off their losses as a tax loss if they've got a big tax liability year. MSG is interesting in that it's one of the few big projects in Vegas that I don't think it's associated with a hotel. So it's just a venue, and most big projects like that, like big casinos or whatever big project is associated with a new hotel or a hotel expanding to put a theme, to tack on a theme park or some other attraction to bring people in. So it's quite a gamble for Madison Square Garden Corporation or MSG Corporation to do. But if they didn't get it to completion, that would be a very big write-off.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think it's going to be really interesting, the first corporate event that happens in there. And one of the problems, I think, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the big halls, all the big, convention center-y type halls, not LVCC, but like, ARIA has a big convention area in the back. They always have to have dozens of large breakout rooms within a short walking distance to be used for a corporate thing, because you have your keynote and everybody goes out to their breakout rooms and then they turn the room for the evening band, whatever. So it'd be interesting if it ever does that. But can you imagine the meetings where, and I think that we are all immune. Unfortunately, we're all immune to the B in billion, and we're getting that way with trillion. When we look at, debts around the planet, things are, we're a trillion over budget, 23 trillion or 33 trillion over budget. Like, we forget that a billion is 1,000 million. That's a lot of millions. But can you imagine going into the meetings going, yeah, we need another $100 million. We need another 200 million. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, it's just 1 billion. No, that's 1,000 millions that they had to scratch at over and over. It's like, I can't imagine. And then, we feel bad when one of our videos goes a half day over in post. Like, good grief.
The one participant in this that is definitely not taking a huge risk and is probably going to have a huge return is U2. So the numbers that are rumored that they're getting paid, are just a huge percentage of the opening ticket, as well as.
What numbers are you hearing?
I'm hearing the numbers I heard were $10 million up front and 75% of the ticket. Like, so that's a lot of money. Like, they had a hard time. So they that's the number that has been floating around. So anyway, so that's, that means that MSG is potentially taking $1 or $2 million a show, like, because it's sold out. 17,000 tickets times $400 is like $6.5 million, $7 million a unit. But then you're giving a bunch back to the band, and then you're keeping a little bit of it. Now, obviously, that's not the deal they're going to have in the future. So, but you're looking at something that has, now they're also doing other events in that space. So this isn't the concerts aren't the only thing they're doing there. And one of the big advantages of having a big screen that doesn't have a lot of buildup is you can change the space all the time. That's the argument. You can constantly just be doing something else. So I think that, if they start to increase their take on that, then, it seems like it's not a lot, but if they increase what they're taking on those tickets to, let's say, $3 million or $4 million, and then you multiply that by 300 days or 350 days a year, now you're talking about making them making $1 billion a year. So you look at so there's it slowly, that you can see how at first when they first came out, I was 100% like, they are going to be buried, in this event. As I started doing more of the math and figuring out that, they're charging a lot more than the average. I think the average ticket on that thing is like $300 or something like that, $300 or $400 a show. At least that's what I've seen floating around. So the math starts to add up. Now if the other shows are less expensive, or if you're doing more of them, a lot of things happen. One of the things that I think why you might not see corporate in this environment is there's one thing that I haven't seen yet in any cell phone, anything else. I've not seen a person on the screen. So I've not seen iMag. I have seen experiential things. And I think that's because it takes too long to get to the screen. So I think that there's a delay issue, because they have to process all that video to get it in there. And I think that is, we have trouble with using hardware that doesn't do any processing, and the audio is still not lining up with the video. Adding a Stitcher and all the other things that are required, they could lose, as much as a quarter second, on the screen. But I find it fascinating that I haven't ever seen any person on that screen.
They do.
So the U2
people.
concert, you didn't see any large people of the band on the screen?
Have you seen cell phone coverage? You have?
Yeah, so they have a couple of different ways that they'll do it. They have like styles that they do. One of the things they did is they had an animated background with these like helicopters that came in with spotlights, and in the beam of the spotlight, they had live footage from the stage.
Okay.
They also do a thing where they have like a sea of stars or something, whatever. And then in it are like billboards that pop up that have the band in the billboards. So they are doing iMag, not full, camera 2 on the screen. Plop. It's always inset in a box or something.
And I wonder how long they hang on it. Because the reason I bring this up is that it is when you see the pictures, they're really small. They're really small in frame. Like they're tiny down there. And so and this is my complaint. This is why I don't go to big shows. Like the last show I saw was actually a U2 at the Coliseum in like the late 90s. And I was sitting closer to the parking lot than the stage, and I was like, I don't need to do this anymore. And so, like I love U2, but I don't I don't need to do that again. Anyway, so I think that I have a problem in general with being far away from that screen. I think that the distribution we're seeing from out to theaters is something that probably makes more sense to me than trying to make a giant venue. That said, I can't wait to go to the Sphere. Like I can't wait to see it. I actually think that there's a smaller Sphere that's in Burbank. I'd rather go to that one. It's like tiny. It's like a tiny little Sphere that they use to demo the product. I haven't ever been in it. I can just see it from my hotel room.
The other issue, sorry, about the iMag is that nobody is sitting very far from the screen. So the delay, if there are delay issues, they'll be enhanced because you're really relatively close to the screen.
Yeah. Jeff?
And so far, we've only talked about inside the Sphere. Let's remember that the outside of the Sphere is money generating, the advertising revenue that they can get from the outside of that thing.
Yeah, it's some insane number too. Like to be on the Sphere per day is lots of money.
I think it was almost $500,000.
Yeah, so they're generating
$75K.
Yeah, per day. So they're I think that I went from being very pessimistic to, oh, they might make a lot of money with this. And this to get back to the original question, there's also an impact on a failed project on a brand. So, at some point the brand oftentimes will make a decision just to eat through it because they can't afford to be seen as they built this halfway and then quit. Go ahead, John.
Jeff, you stole my thunder. So they're charging 400 and change per day, and their CPM is interesting because maybe 500,000 people will see it on a daily basis, but they're calculating all the social media hits in that number.
I have to say that I was at the what was it? I don't know what they call it now. It used to be the Las Vegas Hotel. It used to be something else. It's the
then the Hilton, then the Westgate, and then who knows?
I don't know what it's called anymore. Anyway, you could see it from there, and you can't not look at it. Like you can't. It's moving. It's big. It's huge, and you just can't not stare at it and look at what's going on there. Go ahead, Bill.
So the accounting for live shows and things like that is weird. And I was reading not too long ago after Jimmy Buffett's passing about some of his brilliance in the business world. That's how he ended up with $1 billion at the end of his life. But he made a deal once. First, he asked for 110% of the gate, which is, I want $1.10 for every dollar in tickets you sell. And they were going, well, you're crazy. We're never going to do this. And they got into a big bunch of negotiations. And he said, look, I can put so many butts in seats. You're going to do fine. Give me 110 or I'll ask for 115%. And then it got so contentious that in the end, he looked at him, he said, okay, tell you what, you keep the whole gate. Just give me merch. Give me the T-shirts. And they went, yeah, wait. And they stopped and they thought about it. When they actually ran the numbers, Buffett sold so much merchandise that he was actually going to make more off the merch sales than he was getting 110% of the gate. That's how squirrely I think big merchandise and this kind of big event things can be. You really have to be pretty sharp because there's all sorts of hidden profits and hidden costs and hidden.
Well, it's funny. We've seen this a lot where someone who knows how to do math will give you a deal that just looks great, and it oftentimes looks like a low risk hit. And if someone gives you, especially in the event world, if someone gives you something that looks low risk, it means they've figured out some angle. They're like, hey, you don't have to pay anything up front, and they figured out some angle that's going to have them make way. And I've done it in deals where I've said, oh yeah, you can do, this can be da 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 da, and I know what the math is, and I know that they don't know what the math is. It doesn't mean that they don't make any money. It just means that I did really well because I understood the angle that could be used there. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So did I hear this right? You can rent you can actually just put like a billboard on the outside
I'm
of
sure
the
there's
sphere.
a lot of limitations, but I mean, it's not, you can't put anything out there, but yeah, it's
And it's like 400K.
it's like an activation. So, so it's going to be, there's going to be meetings, there's going to be design, there's going to be, this is how this is going to work. But yeah. That's
Last night they had Monday Night Football on there.
So I'm thinking, like, don't be surprised. The next NAB.
Oh yeah,
I'm just
black
saying,
magic.
No. I'm thinking
There'll be
it
a huge black magic.
I'm thinking of blowing out my 401k and just having a Chris Fenwick ad all over that thing for NAB.
Exactly.
It's just going to be
this guy
Fenwick.
at NAB.
The problem is I have to figure out the Fenwick framer on a sphere. That's going to be weird.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Does anyone use Automator app on a Mac, and for what?
Jeff.
So I have a very small, easy Automator that has saved me countless hours. It's built-in tools in there, and it takes a WAV file, and it gives me an AAC data compressed from it. And so I set that up. It's a droplet in my menu bar. So when I'm sending something to a client for review, sending to musicians to let them hear things, not for final product, just for like someone to listen to something, just take a WAV file, take a folder full of WAV files, drop it on that, and it creates MP4 AAC audio files from that. And it's amazing, saves so much time. The big brother to Automator is AppleScript. And I found and modified an AppleScript that takes a your top open numbers document with 2 columns and your top open keynote document. And so I can put a 2-column list of what I want to be lower thirds. And it can be, composer and piece title, or piece title and movement. And I can have an entire spreadsheet of that in numbers, hit one AppleScript, and it will put that into Keynote and give me lower thirds.
Jeff?
Right now and for quite some time, the order of priority and attention from Apple is shortcuts, then AppleScript, then Automator. I don't think anyone at Apple has looked at Automator in years. It's questionable if they've looked at or done anything to AppleScript. When they bought Workflow and turned it into shortcuts for iOS, that team, replaced pretty much the infrastructure for automation in Apple. And that's the focus, because the new modern, and of course it moved to the Mac, so it's great for doing things on the Mac also. I frankly wouldn't even trust anything in Automator, because again, I just have zero confidence that it's using any of the new goodies in current Mac OS. Shortcuts can, for instance, it's the shortcuts in Automator are the easy to use, no programming, no coding, kind of drag and drop blocks of stuff, actions that you can do. What's nice about shortcuts is you can also embed AppleScript for things that it can't yet do. The one nice thing I will tell you about Automator that's still kind of handy is if you want to do something and you don't know what the AppleScript is for that, because a lot of if you need to do UI control, like make something happen that is not able to be automated, you can do the drag and drop, or the one thing you can do is watch me, where you click a record button, you do what you want to happen, and then you hit stop. It'll give you just easy steps, but then you can expand those and get the actual AppleScript code that is doing that, and then move it into something else, like just pure AppleScript or as part of a modern shortcut.
Good, Bill.
The big plus for me about Automator is that they haven't broken it. No matter how many upgrades they've done, all my little Automator scripts still work. Probably the one I use more than anything else is Breakabout multi-page PDFs. I constantly get slideshows sent to me to add as B-roll into videos, and they're usually multi-page, and I can drop them on my Automator applet, and it'll just create a folder with all those slides broken out. That kind of simple repetitive task is really useful to have something you don't have to think about and never seems to break. Although most of my automation now is being done in things like compressor because I have to do more of that in the audiobook world, processing files. But yeah, drag and drop into applets and things like that. Anything that lets you do that, it's a huge time saver.
And the OG of Automator, Sal Segoyan, an old friend of mine, is going to be on at the end of this month. So I think it's August 30th that we're going to have Sal on. So you'll be able to ask all these questions of Sal. He is amazing.
Thank him for saving days out of my life.
Yeah, so we're really excited to have him. So he'll be here, I think, at the end of the month on a Monday. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Apple spent $250 million on Killers of the Flower Moon, debuting October 20th, the first test of Apple's plans to spend $1 billion per year on movies for theaters. Are they spending enough? Why theaters?
Courtney?
Well, an answer to the why theaters is Apple's a prestige product, and they want to attract prestige directors and actors and be qualified for Academy Awards. And Academy Awards have this little rule that says if you have a theatrical length feature film that has to qualify for winning any kind of Oscar, it has to premiere in a theaters, and it has to run for at least 7 consecutive days, and I think 5 or 6 particular city. There's a whole raft of rules here for eligibility. They have to be over 40 minutes. They have to be exhibited in 35 millimeter, 70 millimeter, or in a 24 or 48 frame progressive scan digital cinema product with 2048, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole raft of rules to be eligible for the Oscar. If it premieres on a streaming service first, not eligible. So it has to premiere in theaters and theatrical theaters for at least 7 consecutive days with 3 showings per day, or it can't qualify. So that's one of the main reasons. Plus, they're trying to attract, Martin Scorsese is no slouch, or Leonardo DiCaprio. These are top box office draws. So they're trying to get some eyeballs and some prestige that they're trying to buy to attract more people to the streaming service.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, I was reading about Killers of the Flower Moon, and it's really fascinating to me because according to what I read, they started out making one movie, and then Scorsese said, wait a second, I see something in here, and I want to change the whole movie. So they literally stopped production well into the process, had the script entirely rewritten, changed the focus on characters, and even had DiCaprio, who was signed to do one part, switched to a different part and added other people there. This is somebody with that clout and that creative trust to be able to completely reconstruct something mid-journey and kind of make it something new. I'm really fascinated as to what it was that attracted his attention. I think it had to do with the focus of the movie, moving it away from being more of a traditional cowboy movie and being more a character study, and particularly the Native American aspects of it. I'm just fascinated. I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, one of the big things of the streamers, while they haven't given the same back end to a lot of creatives, they have given them a lot of freedom. So they allow them to, like, they for a while, Netflix was basically going to people and say, what's your the moonshot project that you want to do? Angelina Jolie, I worked on one. I worked on the projection of one that was First They Killed My Father, which was about the Cambodian. And Angelina Jolie wanted to do a movie about the Cambodian genocide in Cambodia within the Cambodian in the Khmer language, and they said, okay, here's the money, and they produced it, and that's what a lot of directors got. Someone like Martin Scorsese is going to get anything he asks for. That's how you get him onto a streaming platform. And part of the issue is that a lot of these filmmakers, as Courtney alluded to, really want to see it on a big screen. They want to go with their friends. They want to have people see what they did on a big screen before it goes into streaming. And so a lot of this is to make them feel better. And it generally makes a lot of these it can offset a lot of the costs as well. So there's a lot of reasons for them to do that. I think that it'll be interesting to see. I think Apple has probably taken the route that most other streamers look like they're about to take. which is a lot less content, spending a lot more per content. I think Apple started very slowly. I don't think you're going to see a significant increase in Apple's productivity. I think they're going to do about the same amount of content that they're doing now. And I think you're actually going to see the other streamers, because of the contract, what we're hearing is the other streamers are going to fall more in line with Apple than less in line with Apple. They've been trying to outproduce Apple, or Netflix has been trying to outproduce everyone. It sounds like all of that's going to calm down. So they're kind of getting into the reality of the next production. And it potentially was going that way anyway, but it's now accelerated a lot. And so you'll see the model is going to change dramatically over the next 2 to 3 years. Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania is up next. I have 2 Stream Decks on a Mac laptop. They attach to a hub. When he moves the Mac for a class or meeting, one of the Stream Decks doesn't wake. Unplugging the USB and replugging typically fixes it. What's going on?
Jeff?
Now, first of all, I assume what John is saying is that the Stream Decks are plugged into the hub. He unplugs and just is taking the Mac, leaving everything there. He comes back, plugs in the hub to the computer, and one of the Stream Decks doesn't wake. First of all, I would say almost certainly the first thing that comes to mind is just to make sure that you are using a powered hub. Those almost certainly need power. They have the little LCDs, all that good stuff. So I would make sure you're using a good powered hub and that it has enough power that you actually can check what the Stream Decks need, 2 of them with whatever else maybe you're running through that hub, and make sure that your hub is delivering enough power for all of that, at least a USB 3.0 hub, which will deliver a little bit more power. And then if that's still not if you already are, then, if you can, it's process of elimination. Try a different hub. Try the cables, even just potentially swapping the existing USB cables between the 2 Stream Decks, and see if that now magically switches which Stream Deck wakes and doesn't. But it's just now elimination to see what specific component of that chain is the problem.
Courtney?
I'm not for sure because I'm not quite that familiar with the stack for the USB handler on the Mac. But what may be happening is if you have 2 identical devices plugged into a USB hub, when you plug that hub into the Mac, it initiates conversation with any USB devices plugged in. And since the 2 of them have the same ID in them, it instantiates a path for the first one, and it sees the second one, and it goes, oh, I've already done that one, and skips it. So if you unplug it and plug it back in again, a few seconds later, it may re-register because the 2 of them are trying to register at the same time, and it may think that it was just the same information coming in, or if it has the same information coming in at the same time, it may not set up a new path for the second hub.
And a quick reminder, of course, you can ask questions throughout the hour. So if you've got questions, you can either use Makana and ask those questions right now and vote on those questions so that we know what order you'd like us to ask them in. Or you can use this little QR code here, or just go to askofficehours.com and then throw those in, and we can address them as they roll in. So go ahead and throw those questions in, and let's go ahead to the next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood here, who was just speaking, is up next for our next question. It's the last day of Prime Day. Has anyone found any good audio-visual deals?
Guy?
Yeah, one of the coolest things that I found recently when I was doing a little research for the new Apple glasses was a product called Nreal, or it was called Nreal when I got them. They're now called Xreal. They look like this. These are a 120-inch display in front of you. And everybody that I've showed these to loves these things. I showed them to John Idelson at Zoomtopia. He bought them. Oliver Breidenbach bought them immediately. Like they're so cool. So right now I have it hooked up to my phone. So to use it it's USB-C into the glasses. And to use HDMI, you need this little adapter box. And if you want to use it with your phone, you have to have the little lightning to HDMI. But you can use this with an ATEM and have a 120-inch multi-view in front of your face. So now you can see things like focus. It's really cool. So they're on sale. Yesterday, they were cheaper. They must have hit some kind of threshold because they're not as cheap as they were.
What did you
yesterday,
get them
they were 22% off. And today, today they're like 11% off. I'll put a link.
Not
in the
that
chat.
I'm looking.
Buy them. I'm serious. Buy them. Everybody
They
here
look
should buy them. I mean, you can always
Here,
return
Alex
them,
is at wallet
they will
opening.
blow you. They will blow your mind. I've had the $3,500 Microsoft glasses. These are really cool for $300. I mean, they're crazy.
There you go, Jeff.
Guy, do they handle if you require corrective lenses for close-up?
Yeah, you can. That's a good question. They do have an add-on where you can take your prescription and add it in, because it's inside of here. There's a piece that you could swap out that would allow you to do that. And there's also a nose thing so that you could swap that. That's included. And then when you want to carry it with you, I was watching movies on the plane. I mean, that's the other thing, is going to a concert. Like I was watching a Taylor Swift concert just to see what it was like in Pink, and it's like they're there. I mean, it's so realistic. So yeah, this is what it fits in with the USB cable. So you could have your Mac on an airplane with a 120-inch screen. And if you get the other piece called the Beam, you could actually pin stuff in your environment. So you could have 3 screens around in your environment. It's really cool.
And is it able to do stereo, given that it's got 2 eyes?
I don't know about that, but sorry, I thought you meant audio. It does have speakers in the earpieces too, so audio comes across. But I don't know if it does stereo with like 3D video.
There you go, Courtney.
Well, that's it. What was the name of that product again, Guy? What was it called?
The X-Real Air.
X-Real Air. I'm going to take a look for that. One of the best deals is I always buy Fire Sticks to put on my TVs, because you can buy a top-end 4K. The Fire Stick 4K, which comes with supports Dolby HDR and all the Atmos audio stuff, and it's $23 on Prime Day. Not the Max. They don't discount the Max, and the only difference in the Max is it has Wi-Fi 6, and if you don't have Wi-Fi 6, it's not going to do you any good, and it doesn't. And it has about 512K more RAM, but that's about the only difference between those two. So $23 for a streaming stick is really good, and it interfaces well with the A-Lady voice control. So it's great for doing searches and telling the A-Lady to put something up on the TV. It turns on the TV, goes to whatever streaming service you have, and puts that up and tunes to it, finds things on YouTube, etc. So I have a lot of those streaming sticks around.
Next question.
Daniel Partridge in Rochester, Minnesota says, I watched the weekend Q&A on Demand Later, and the HDR version makes the colors look washed out in Firefox. I read Firefox is probably not supporting HDR. Is there some setting I'm missing to get something that looks a little better, not in HDR?
Yeah, you can get a plugin for Firefox called Chrome. So like the Chrome browser will probably work just fine. I don't know. I think that Firefox is pretty far behind on supporting a lot of these processes inside of that browser. And so what it has to do with the fact that it's not recognizing the HDR portion of the manifest, most likely. And so it's just giving you the SDR version. If it looks really washed out, what's actually happening is that it is recognizing that there's a video there. It's just not applying any of the conversion back, and so that's going to mean that it's not trying to tone map. It's not trying to do anything else. It's just delivering to you the HDR. And it would look like it was poured. It would probably look like they poured coffee on it. So typically, so I think that's probably the issue. On a PC, I don't know whether you're on a Mac or PC from your question. On a PC, you're going to have more problems with viewing HDR than on a Mac, because Apple has been supporting a lot of these tools, a lot of the HDR stuff for quite some time, and Microsoft has just been a little less speedy in that area. So it also depends on what type of HDR they're doing. So what you can do is, if you a lot of times what you're linking to, if you go into the developer version of your developer view, you'll see the manifest, or you'll see a link to the manifest. You can download that manifest and see whether they're delivering the HDR in HDR10 or are they delivering in Dolby Vision. If you're on a PC in Firefox, the chances of it reading Dolby Vision are very low. So unless you paid the $1 that Microsoft pushes off to you to pay for that, you will not. It may be misread. So, but I think that if you're watching it on Chrome or Safari on a Mac, you should find that it pops up and looks good. Specifically, Safari on a Mac should look crystal clear with an HDR signal. And this, again, has to do with that Apple just invested in this about a decade before everybody else. And so everything is a lot smoother there. So, but try those and come back to us. If you try on another browser and they don't work, let us know. If it's just Firefox, then there's not a lot of ways to fix it. Firefox is pretty far behind in this area. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up with this. California Governor Newsom signs the Right to Repair Act into law minus game consoles and alarm systems. Will Apple phones, Mac Minis and so forth, come under this? And he's got a link there.
Chris.
So is there anything that Apple says that we are not allowed to open up our iPhone and repair it?
They actually send you a kit now. They have a kit that they'll send you so that you can do it yourself.
So before the kit, did they tell me I was not allowed to open up my phone?
No.
Yeah, so
they
the
just
thing
said,
about
they
right
just said
to
it would void
repair
your warranty.
Just void warranty, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't say you're not allowed, but it would void your warranty, yeah. Which is a lot of things say that.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a law or any ruling that says we can't do it. You're more than welcome to repair it. However, you might break it. It's really hard. The tools you buy at, Home Depot probably aren't the ones you need. You're probably not going to need a drill or a chainsaw to open it up. You're going to need specialty tools. I mean, I don't understand what this is all about. I mean, they're just hard to fix. The right to repair doesn't mean it's going to be easy to repair.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to do it, but you'll probably break it because it's hard.
Bill?
Yeah, for those of you who aren't aware of it, to me, the class act in this is iFixit. iFixit is a website that you can look up your actual device, and most importantly, they will give you a degree of difficulty. They will also send you a pack of disposable tools, plastic spudgers and the little Torx tip screwdrivers that are inexpensive. The whole thing doesn't usually cost a lot of money, but most importantly is their step-by-step instructions. I have gotten up to medium difficulty and had success repairing particular things, like when an old laptop of mine, the left stereo speaker was starting to crackle. So I was able to go in, take apart my laptop, replace that speaker using their step-by-step brilliant instructions and get it done. I've also run into the outer edge of that. If you think you're, expert level, you're probably not, because some of those repairs are incredibly difficult to accomplish. So just be aware that repairing is possible on these Apple things, and it does typically void your warranty.
Jeff?
I will just add to the iFixit praise. It's great. And I've done one of the haymakers where, I mean, I needed the special kit and I opted for the version that gives me the special tools for the special screws and everything. And I mean, it was a Mac laptop, and I mean, you're moving things that you wouldn't even dream of, like, why is this here? But of course, once you look, it's just there's an intelligence to the layout, but they let you do it. But the right to repair is also about how long parts will be available for. So it dictates that. Apple saw this coming, so they quite some time ago started allowing authorized repair facilities, third party. That, in other words, it used
they
to
let
be,
you do it at home. I mean, they let you. It's not. They're allowing you. They'll send you the kit to do the thing, and they have authorized and unauthorized, and they have. They kind of. Yeah, it's such.
Didn't used to be, right? In other words, your option was you take it to the
warranty,
Genius Bar. Or
but you may still do it. If you open it and break it, you're still going to be on the hook for it. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Right, but in other words, just to add, if you take it to one of the third-party authorized repair facilities, it's considered a legitimate repair.
Yeah, you have to go to an authorized repair facility for it to be considered a legitimate fix. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Mr. Fenwick, you're absolutely wrong. If you watch Louis Rossman, he goes over this ad nauseum. He's been in front of many state legislatures trying to get this passed. You cannot get parts. You cannot get schematics. Some things you cannot repair because they're soldered onto the motherboard, and you just can't fix it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, he's right. Louis Rossman brought up the whole part of this and campaigned for it. But another problem they had with the phones is the fingerprint reader, the security issue. You couldn't replace the screen because the fingerprint reader was attached to the screen, and to reauthorize a new fingerprint reader, because it was part of the screen, you had to have a special tool that only Apple had access to. So you could replace it, but then you couldn't log into it. So you couldn't for security purposes, they said, only authorized Apple repair centers that have the special reauthorization tool to reauthorize the fingerprint reader for logging in are allowed. So that was one reason that the whole right to repair was a big issue. And the equipment that they send you to take it apart, which involves heating up the whole screen at a single time to an even temperature to remove the all the stuff that's glued together without destroying the phone. That stuff's fairly expensive to rent and keep. So unless you're a dealer, it doesn't make sense to.
Well, it doesn't, but I don't think the law requires them to make it easy. Like, I think that's just, you have a
No,
right to
but I mean,
repair,
it just
not right
doesn't
to
make
repair easy.
financial sense to do it.
Yeah,
You have the right to
it
repair.
is.
You'd be stupid if you were a single person to pay for all that equipment to repair a $1,000 phone, $700 worth of equipment rental or something to repair it.
It would be crazy to take an iPhone to anyone other than Apple. Like, I'm just letting you know, like they can give this, Apple's like, let's do right to repair. If you take your iPhone to someone other than Apple to fix it, you are nuts. Like certified nuts. Because that the level of precision that's built at, and all the security and all the things that are tied into it, for you to let somebody else mess with that enclave is, I can't say the word, bat crazy. It is. And so, it's fine to let, Apple will send you the kit. Apple is just going, here, if you're that crazy, we'll give you enough rope to hang yourself. But the phone will never work the same way again. It will never work the same. I've tried it. Just as an old phone to have it fixed, it's never the same. And it's just find a way to find money.
If they want you to leave it with them.
Yeah, I will never leave a phone with. The problem is that is my security. My phone locks immediately. I don't that's my. I do not allow someone else to touch my phone. It's just crazy. And so I get all the right repair stuff. It's fine, but it's not viable in the current technology, because all that stuff has been talking about 3 nanometer processes and then packing all this stuff in. And you're basically, those batteries are like little bombs, because they hold so much, they hold so much energy in such a small amount of area. It is insane to let civilians play with this, and it's fine. There'll just be a bunch of things that go wrong, and that's what will happen, because this is a dumb law. Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina is up next. Nobe Omniscope announced a new major release this week. Has anyone tried it yet? Is this the answer to our combined video and audio scoping dreams?
Go ahead, Guy.
It's pretty cool. It is still a little bit buggy. I've had it crash a couple times. But here's what it looks like. One of the features that I'm digging is that you can drag around a face like this, and you can get just the reading. And I used to have to do this manually. This was tough to do. I'd have to do it in a different piece of software. So now I could check my vector scope and see if flesh tones are accurate, or if I need to make some changes either in white balance or in my lighting. But yeah, this is it. It does have, if you get the upgraded license, you can do some NDI outputs. I'm not sure what all the other new features are, but it is pretty cool. It works.
I think that they've Omniscope has really cornered this market. I just see it everywhere now, with trucks and in production processes, and it is by far the most technical one. Yes, it is a little. I think that the current version. I had a problem with the last version until this version came out, where it wasn't properly syncing with my Mini. One thing to notice is that you can't. The black magic didn't show up when the first beta. I think it's now working where it didn't show up automatically as an option. You had to go in and turn something on. But it is on sale. I think it's 25% off right now, and we are working on getting them on to talk about it. It's the scopes that you need, in my opinion. If you're looking for scopes at this point, we've been using it for years. We've used a lot of other ones. It's not any less accurate than the hardware scopes. I think it's the same. We've gone head to head with them, and it gives you so much flexibility. It's really, really great. Next question.
Guy, your face was a touch warm. Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada says, does anyone use Digital Performer for Mac anymore? Oh, by the way, this is a QR code question drop.
Does anyone use? I don't think I've opened Digital Performer in a decade. So I think it's, I don't think a lot of us think about that much. I think that people who are really into Digital Performer are really into it. I don't know if it's growing much in the market. Next question.
Next question from Roger Martin in Tonto Basin, Arizona. What do you recommend for taking a music video that's in Spanish, translated to lyrics in English, to superimpose on the video? They'd like the lyrics to look like the video. I sent looking something, he's looking for something automatic that will do it. Thanks.
If it's a music video and it's 3.5 or 4 minutes long, I would hesitate to worry about whether it's automatic or not. I mean, this is like an afternoon to work on it. You'll spend more time trying to figure out how to make this work. Now, if you've got a lot of them to do, then that makes sense. But if you have one that you're trying to fix, I wouldn't bother. I would just go in. You probably have the lyrics somewhere, and you can place them in many editors. So whether it's Resolve or Premiere or Final Cut, you can place those. I find Final Cut's actually the easiest interface to move the text around. And then you place them in there, you move them around, you make sure it's just what you want, and then you export an SRT, and then that's going to import into your system. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there are a number of suppliers out there that provide video translation for closed captioning. Here's one called Veed.io that you upload your video, it translates it, and then you download it again. And I believe it's free. So, and it will do, 185 different languages from whatever you upload. So there's a chance. And I know there's one that does AI that actually matches the lip movements of the people on the screen. And I can't remember the name of it. Maybe John remembered.
Go ahead, Bill.
And I was just going to say that a lot of them, I use Simon Says, and I think other people do too. They will allow you to change the language, so you can literally just take the audio track.
Does it recognize Spanish? I know Simon Says will go into many languages. I don't know if it recognizes Spanish. I thought it was just English.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never tried one that originated in Spanish. I've gone the other way many times.
Yeah.
But my other point was that even if it's 99% accurate, 99.9, that's 1 in 100 words that's going to be wrong. So you still have to look through it if you want it to be done right. If it's just casual, not a big deal, but it does require some human intervention at the back end if you want it just right.
Go, Jeff.
And the one that I would say take a look at that we talked about, a couple of weeks ago is HeyGen. And that's probably the one Courtney's talking about. But it's the one where they showed a video where a guy just recorded a video, and then all of a sudden, magically, now he's got versions of that video where he is speaking in other languages, and it matches the lips and everything. And I don't know, they may also have, since they're doing all that, they may also have the ability to do the text on screen as well, and perhaps in just only the text if that's what you're looking for.
Next question.
Sam Rhimes in Maidenhead in the UK says, looking for camera for content creation and streaming with a budget of $500 US. Any suggestions?
Yeah, there's a couple that are out there that, I would be looking at a lot of the Sony line. The Sony line has, especially if you're doing content creation, the autofocus works really, really well. There's the ZV-1F, the A6000. There are some other ones from Canon, like the EOS 2000D, but the autofocus, when you're doing content creation and streaming, the autofocus becomes really, really important, and Sony is better at it than everyone else right now. Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada says, has anyone seen or used Commander One Pro FTP client in the Apple App Store? Is it worth buying? And that's another one of our QR drop questions.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I don't know about this one. This one's $30. I use FileZilla. It's free. It's super easy to use. I think it's probably the most popular for Mac.
I use Transmit. So Transmit is from Panic. Go ahead, Guy.
Transmit or CyberDuck's the other one to take a look at.
Yeah, I have been using. I don't know. I've been using Transmit since pretty much since it came out. I think it actually came as swag in a Mac World thing many years ago, and I just have. That's all I've used. But I haven't used. Do we use FTP that much anymore? I don't. I'm trying to think of the last time I used it. It's been a while. It's been a day. Next question.
Marty Adius in Maryland says, the USB Compliance Organization has at least 30 different classifications for USB ports and cables, but there's no requirement to mark the cables. How much confusion does this cause consumers, and why?
Good morning.
Yeah, I have all these USB wires, and there are A's and B's and C's and now 4s, Thunderbolts. Once you take it out of the package, there's no way to know what's what. I plugged a plugged my phone in the other day using a wire that matches the connectors, and the phone said it was going to take 34 and a half hours to charge. And I changed the cable, and it was an hour and a half. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the different classifications that are specified, this is what packages are supposed to be marked at, because after testing and compliance, it's crazy. What's going on?
Yeah, go, Jeff.
Yeah, I think the wheels fell off that cart as soon as they renamed, USB 3 to, and I still can't keep it straight. That's now USB 3 point whatever Gen 1. For the average consumer, it was really easy. USB 2, USB 3. USB 3 must be better than USB 2. And USB-C, of course, has made it completely worse for the average consumer. The average consumer, and I hear this all the time, does not understand the difference between USB-C, the plug, and Thunderbolt, and USB 3, and all the other standards behind that plug. So, it's a licensing thing. I mean, that's what it is, and why we're in this situation. And if everyone remembers, there was the guy at Google who took it upon himself, an engineer who started building a spreadsheet of cables that won't fry your device. First batch of USB-C cables, if you plug the wrong USB-C cable off of Amazon into your phone or whatever, and they were getting fried. So he would just test them and then put them in the spreadsheet. I mean, that's how bad it got.
I label my cables and I test them. You can test them for power, throughput, as well as, you get little external testers, and then you label them because the ones that matter. Yeah. So that you can figure out what's going on there. Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as was pointed out by both of the previous people.
1, 2.
Hey, you're still
open,
unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
I found a website that is understanding the symbols of USB that has the compliance symbol for what you're looking at on a port. And so the difference between high speed, super speed plus, super speed with power delivery, super speed plus with power delivery, USB 4. So you can see what all the little symbols are there. So if they're past the USB organization for compliance, they're allowed to use these different symbols. But
which they don't put on anything.
Well, they're supposed to put them on the cables, and they're supposed to put them.
And you're trusting that the Chinese knockoff cables aren't putting the wrong little print on there.
That's what the licensing is for, But if they don't pay the licensing to put, and they just duplicate a standard USB. I mean, if they put the simple, just standard USB symbol on it, which is this, and they don't, and it's more capable than that standard symbol, you're not going to know unless you try it.
This is a standard by open committee where none of us are as dumb as all of us. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach. In the DaVinci Resolve render settings, there's an audio normalization setting for target loudness, peak, and loudness units full scale. But it's always way off. He's tried manual settings, tried YouTube mode. What's he missing?
Go, Jeff.
Well, in the interest of time, I'll just throw it to anyone who has an answer for me. Why isn't it giving me my final loudness correctly?
I don't use any of the normalization settings, so I make sure that it's what it should be on the way out.
Well, that's why the setting is there, right?
Yeah, don't do it. Go ahead, Jeff.
My question for Jeff is, in which direction is it off? Is he coming out too low, too high, or don't even know?
Oh, usually too low. Yeah. And in fact, it seems like it's really not changing it at all. So, I'm getting like negative 23, 22 instead of like the YouTube mode should just give me 14.
Yeah, the way to fix normalization is not to use it. Go ahead, Morty.
Yeah, it seems that normalization is actually looking for the highest peak in the signal and setting the level so that meets the target.
Well, they have a setting. The options allow you to specify both, a LUFS as well as a peak. So in theory, it should be doing that.
You should not use it.
Yeah, thumbs down. But then don't put the setting there if it doesn't do anything.
Don't. it's not worth it. so anyway, so that's all I'll say. A quick reminder that we have, of course, today we're going to be talking just a couple minutes about Practical Guide to Equalization. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the Practical Guide to Interviews, and so we're really going in a more practical, like nuts and bolts. So we've talked about like how to think about interviews and how to think about that process, but this is really about loading in and figuring out where you're going to put things and lighting and the process of it. So it's really a logistical discussion about interviews and how to put those things together from a video perspective. So that's what we have tomorrow. Of course, on Friday, the team or parts of the team are going to come in and talk about how the incredible coverage of IBC was executed. So they're going to talk about how they did the backhauls and how they set it all up. It was really a great. If you haven't seen any of it, you can go back and take a look at that. A quick reminder that on Monday, we're going to have Ian McCaig on, and he was just on Gray Matter, and it was an incredible interview. Listen to that. It's on graymatter.show. Listen to that interview and think of the questions that you want to ask because it's going to be an amazing interview coming up on Monday. Let's jump into the second hour. Welcome back to the second hour, and we are now going to talk about practical EQ, and I'm going to hand this off to Jeff to kind of set the stage. Go ahead, Jeff.
So several weeks ago, we talked about equalization, kind of broke down the actual controls and parameters, and we figured it'd be a good idea to bring a couple of sound sources to just EQ on air, and I'm going to hopefully share the ATEM. So I've got a sound source coming into an audio input of the ATEM, and this is the equalizer built into the ATEM. I figured it was a good sort of common denominator that probably most people have access to. It's not my favorite EQ in the world, but let's see if we have some sound coming here.
A great fire blazed on the hearth, and the smell of cedar cleanly split.
Is that coming in? You're hearing that?
Absolutely, I am.
Okay. So this is a female voice doing a narration, and so where to start with this? Definitely, I like a high-pass filter because female voice doesn't go very low, and so this will assist with any popping and rumbles and air conditioning noise that's in the room. I wish that the ATEM high-pass filter was a little steeper. This is a 12 dB per octave, but we'll use it because it's what we have.
A great fire blazed on the hearth,
as we roll that
and the
up,
smell of cedar cleanly split and sweet wood burning bright wafted a cloud of fragrance down the island. Deep inside the cave, she sang the goddess Calypso.
You hear as I go too far, the voice gets thin. So we're probably looking at somewhere in the, for men, 100, women, 120, somewhere in there. We can go higher, we can go lower. This is, making sure my mic's on. So this is an isolated voice, so we're not dealing with this going out through a PA system, which is going to be vastly different if we're having the ring of the room. And then
a great fire blazed on the hearth, and the smell of cedar cleanly split and sweet wood burning
low
bright
mids just a little bit.
Wafted a cloud of fragrance down the island. Deep inside the cave, she sang the goddess Calypso,
I'm gonna find up here in the
lifting
in upper
her
mids and highs
breathtaking
some of
voice
that,
as
that
she glided back
crispiness
and
probably
forth
some of
before
her
her loom,
sibilance.
her golden shuttle weaving. But as for great Odysseus, a great fire blazed on the hearth, and the smell of cedar cleanly split and sweet wood burning bright wafted a cloud of fragrance down the island. Deep inside the cave, she sang the goddess Calypso, lifting her breathtaking voice as she glided back and forth before her loom, her golden shuttle weaving.
So it's not a terribly recorded voice to begin with, and we just give it a little bit of cleaning up, a little bit of support. I'm going to switch to a different now male voice, and let me reset that EQ.
Where were you when I planned the earth? Tell me, if you are so wise. Do you know who took its dimensions, measuring its length with a cord? What were its pillars built on?
So there we hear a
Who
vast
laid down
difference
the
when we pull out
cornerstone
the
while the
low
morning
frequencies of a male
stars
voice.
burst out
And
singing?
as you play with
And the-
this, one of the things that comes up is when you think about how to create not just for the basic, like making something sound better, but you can hear as Jeff pulls that in the ability to do effects. Like you want to do a phone call, you want to do, something that's far away. Using, this EQ is giving you the control that you need to kind of make that actually happen.
Yeah, so if I want to make that sound more like he's a phone call, telephone.
Where were you when I planned the earth? Tell me, if you are so wise. Do you know who took its dimensions, measuring its length with a cord? What were its pillars built on?
So we can look for
Who laid
like
down the
clarity and
cornerstone while the
intelligibility.
morning stars burst out singing and the angels shouted for joy? Have you ever... Where were you when I planned the earth? Tell me, if you are so wise. Do you know who took its dimensions, measuring its length with a cord? What were its pillars built on? Who laid down the cornerstone while the morning stars burst out singing and the angels shouted for joy?
You can hear the body come right back into it when you pull that. So when you bring that bass up a little bit, you could hear the body just kind of flowing back into it.
Right. So that's where I would love a steeper high-pass filter, because I can only get this up so far before it begins to affect that body. And you see that I'm beginning to add some of that body back in just above where I'm trying to cut out the garbagey lows. These two voices here don't have a large problem with plosives and popping, which we should try to prevent at the mic. First of all, we should try to use a pop filter, try to have good mic technique where we're not talking directly into the mic. So I have a sung vocal that's got a little bit of, let me see if I have the right one here.
Pain, pain deep in my heart, pain deep in my heart. I've been living with this misery.
Sorry, wrong one. This vocal tended to be a little too close to the mic.
Now what do you say to a young soul who gave you their heart only to let it go?
So we hear that he's getting a little bit of popping and kind of that proximity effect that's a little too strong.
Now what do you say to a young soul who gave you their heart only to let it go?
And I also found once this was put into a dense mix of music, it really lacked kind of the clarity that it might need.
Now what do you say to a young soul who gave you their heart only to let it go?
And one of the reasons he was so close to the mic is he wants this really intimate, breathy, but it was getting, these artifacts and this low frequency stuff going on. So rolling that out.
What do you say to a young...
So this second band is, if I turn this one up, you see is just a shelf filter. So we can kind of generally shape the lows and the highs. I'm still removing extreme low stuff because of popping.
Now what do you say to a young soul who gave you their heart only to let it go? But on her grave you promised me that forever we would be. I was waiting on something eternal.
So the voice by itself, not horrible, but with the equalization gets a lot clearer, and especially as it gets in with a bunch of musical things, it's going to need that. I'm going to go on a completely different realm here, and this is sort of a repair. And this is a hi-hat mic as part of a full drum set, and it had some problems in the wiring. It's got a terrible hum in it. So you'll hear as I roll out the lows, that hum is going to go away. But another option is to use a notch filter.
I was just about to say, have you ever used a notch filter for that? It seems like so that's you want one ahead of me. There you go.
Yeah. So hum is usually based on line frequency. So our power in the United States is 60 cycles per second, 60 hertz. So we're going to have 60 and harmonics of that. So I'm going to leave this one off for a moment, but set it to be a notch filter at 120. Now, probably that does the fix, and then musically putting this in a mix, I probably would end up rolling off some of the lows anyways, and maybe even brightening this hi-hat a bit.
And how did you know that it was, for the listeners, how did you know that it was 120? So you had 60 and 120.
Harmonics, the harmonic series. So overtones always are integer multiples. So 60, 120, we could try 180 to see if that gives us any additional improvement here. So that's just a fact of anything that's periodic. If it's 60 cycles per second, it will have only frequency components at 60 and integer multiples, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times 60 hertz. And that goes for any periodic, anything that has a pitch. That's the harmonic series. So that's, what makes a trumpet playing an A sound different from a piano playing an A, sound different from a hum, because it doesn't know the words, but check. So one thing that's interesting.
Sorry for interrupting. Is that only if it's a sine wave, or if it's a square wave at 60, doesn't it have odd numbered harmonics as well?
So a sine wave is only the fundamental. So it would just be 60, and all the other harmonics would be at an amplitude of nothing. And a square wave, the odd harmonics have an amplitude and the even harmonics do not. So 60 would have some amplitude, 120 would have no amplitude, 180 would have some amplitude, 240 would have no amplitude. And that's just a particular thing about a square wave is its odd harmonics. And that's kind of what makes the thing to know about this is to remember that a doubling is an octave. So the even harmonics, in this case, 60, 120, and then 4 times, which would be 240, those are all things that musically work nice. So they are an octave above and 2 octaves above. So if our note is an A, it's an octave above, it's another A, it's 2 octaves above, it's another A. Those tend to sound pleasing, and odd harmonics tend to sound a little harsher because they are the 5th and the 3rd and the flat 7th and these other notes that are not as consonant as harmonics, as octaves. And so things that cause odd harmonic distortion, things like distortion, clipping a mic preamp, transistor mic preamp, clipping digitally, that tends to be harsher than do things that give more even harmonic distortion, things like vacuum tubes run correctly, and analog tape saturation tends to be a little more pleasing sounding. That's why we like the distortion of certain things and don't like the distortion of others. And now we've swept way off of EQ. And this hum, if you're in a different part of the world and your power is at 50 cycles per second, then everything is 50 and integer multiples of that, 50, 100, 150, and so on. Something that's interesting about this is that musically, if I were going to decide to just roll off now the lows of the hi-hat, because there's a lot of just low-frequency energy whacking on a hi-hat, I might use that same high-pass filter. As I sweep that up, listen to the interaction of the high-pass filter and the notches, because every EQ will interact with all the other EQs. So as you sweep this up, while the notches are doing a really good job of pulling out those hum, when I get across certain frequencies, that hum will jump back up because of the interaction of the two EQs. So it's a subtle thing, but that hum actually comes and goes just a little bit depending on how these interact. Should I keep going, or you want to go to questions?
No, keep going. We're if you're watching this and you have questions, you go ahead and throw them in. But let's go a little further, and then we'll open up to questions. So go ahead and start throwing those questions into Makana, and you can also use, of course. I am paying attention to the drop, so if you want to go ahead and use askofficehours.com, you can do that as well. But go ahead and throw those questions in.
So here's a poorly recorded kick drum that sort of sounds like you're just beating on a piece of cardboard. And if I kind of raise up, so I'm doing a boost here to find this particular frequency, and I'm going to broaden that EQ. So this is a peak EQ, and I have a frequency, and I have a gain and a Q, or a width of that filter. So I'm making it a little broader with a fairly sizable amount of boost. I'm listening for that, what I consider to be the terrible cardboard sound of this. So there's of course, a nice thump down here. We're going to go find that later. But first I'm finding all this sort of low mid that actually makes this drum sound bad. Then after I've done that, now I can go look for this fundamental thump and probably narrow in on that. And then maybe look for, there's somewhere we get a little bit of attack and snap. Up here you're going to hear the snares coming through, so I don't want to be there. So we're kind of turning what's a very flat and This was purposely chosen as the wrong mic for the kick drum because it didn't do any of this. And then we're kind of with EQ helping that out. I would always, encourage you to listen in the process and choose the mic and choose the placement first, and not just assume that you're going to fix it all with EQ. But if you're stuck with something like this, then it's a case where we can help things out. And so there's a process of taking out things I don't want and adding things, enhancing things that I do.
And definitely listening to things. And you can find some of this on YouTube. I know in my early days of radio, there was a CD, I think it was called Golden Ears or something. It was like ear training, and it would tell you what was wrong with it, and then it would move through it. And it was a serious red pill conversation because it was like, for those of you who don't want to say red pill, like on the Matrix, like it was one of those things that as soon as it just went through and identified all the things that could be wrong with your audio and all the things that you're looking for your audio, and then you couldn't stop hearing it everywhere. Like it opens it up. So listening to these things really makes a big difference. The panel's got a couple things, and then we'll jump into questions, and we'll come back to more EQ. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, one thing I figured I'd add when you mentioned, Alex, that this is how effects like speaking on mimicking a telephone and things like that. One thing that I found handy is EQ, if it's from a trustworthy, reputable manufacturer, will come with a bunch of presets for telephone, AM radio, and male vocal, female vocal. And while, of course, they're almost certainly not exactly right for your particular voice you're recording, they'll at least give you a reference. You'll see what are they doing to the EQ to try and achieve what they think is good for that type of sound, and understand which bands they're moving and everything they're doing to that, and kind of take it backwards like that.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a really
good, Jeff.
Sorry, that's a really great point, especially with EQ, because we tend to have certain frequencies for certain instruments. They're not going to be the right booster cut, because that might depend on what mic you used and where it was placed and how much proximity effect happened, but those can help you as you're learning EQ. Calling up that preset for, bass guitar or male vocal has typical center frequencies and typical cues, and then you need to use your ear to adjust those levels. A little aside, the same thing goes for dynamics. You can use presets to get you in the ballpark for attack times and release times and ratios of compression. The big difference in compression is the preset, the manufacturer that wrote that preset has no idea what level you recorded your tracks, so the actual threshold of the dynamics will not apply, and that's where you need to, again, use your ear and adjust the threshold. But yeah, presets can be, don't just turn them on, as Jeff said, don't just turn them on and leave them, but they can be a great place to start. Sorry, go ahead, Marty.
Good, Marty.
Yeah, so when I think about how I'm going to approach EQ, I'm thinking that there are particular reasons for applying EQ, and that would be corrective, creative, and destructive. And then there's subtractive EQ and additive EQ. And then I know that when it comes to speech, it's all about intelligibility. And so there might be times when I'm listening to a voice, somebody speaking in a microphone on stage, probably a lavalier microphone because they can be the most inaccurate and difficult to place. I'm thinking, this voice sounds a little thick, right? Maybe there's a little too much mid-lows. And to make it clearer, easier to understand, better intelligibility, I may pull down a little bit at a certain frequency range. Now, whether it's speech or music, there are certain frequency ranges that are widely recognized to have certain characteristics. And Michael Curtis, who we had on this show a while ago, produced a document that you can find online. It's called the 9 EQ Pivot Points. And in that document, it spells out very clearly which frequency bands have which characteristics, when you want to boost them, when you want to cut them. And so whether you're doing music or speech.
Good, Chris.
I yield my time. It took too long. I totally forgot what I was going to say.
You got to write it down, Chris. We're getting to that age. You got to write it down. Write this down. Go, Courtney.
Getting to that age? I'm way past that age.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Here's a little anecdote. When moving, those of us that are older and transitioned from analog to digital, in doing production recording for the film business in the 80s, when we were transitioning from analog recording on the Nagra on tape to digital recording on DAT, there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of prejudice against digital, and the common description was, "Oh, it sounds too brittle. I don't want to. We got to go back to analog. That all the sound that's coming out of production sounds too brittle in this digital stuff." And the difference was that in analog recording, production recording, you're using a Nagra that rolls off around 14,000 cycles fairly radically if you're recording at 7.5 IPS. And so for the first time, they were hearing the full frequency response of the microphones. And a lot of the microphones at the time, like the Sennheiser 416, which was the primary, it was a 415 at the time, has this boost at about 5 to 10 kilohertz to increase intelligibility, and because those microphones a lot of times were put in windscreens that would attenuate a little of that. So they were boosted on the high frequency. And I found that to satisfy the producers, to keep them from forcing me back to analog because of the warmth of analog, I just would roll off about 3 dB in the 5 to 10,000 hertz range for the microphones, and they suddenly thought, "Oh, it's warm again. How did you do that?" Yeah, The magic of equalization, and now we've become used to full frequency response in all digital equipment, and a lot of the intelligibility has suffered, as was pointed out earlier, because hearing flat full frequency response can reduce the intelligibility of dialogue. So now you have to equalize correctly to pull the dialogue out of those low frequency sound effects that are full frequency. To maintain intelligibility when you're fighting against the music track and the sound effects track.
Let's go to the questions. First question.
First question comes from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida. As we get older and our hearing changes from that ridiculous sound system we put in our car, how do we compensate when adjusting EQ for the masses?
Marty?
Yeah, it's interesting that you chose that example, because anytime I get into somebody else's car and we're going to go for a long trip, I'll look at the EQ that they have set on their sound system, and I'm frequently aghast at at how they choose to equalize their sound and make it pleasing to them. But nevertheless, as we age, as we all age, our hearing changes slightly depending on our environment and what we listen to frequently, and whether we go to a lot of shows or rock shows, or we're around subway trains or airplanes or whatever. And every once in a while I'll go to an audiologist and I'll have my ears tested, have my hearing tested, and that comes out with a graph of what I'm hearing well, which frequencies I'm kind of missing or I'm a little low at. Ideally, we want to have a flat hearing, and so that what we can be confident that, or can we be confident, is the question, that what we hear is what most other people are hearing, because everybody hears a little differently. So by having a hearing test and having your ears checked every couple of years, you can kind of know what you're missing, what frequencies you're hearing more of or less than, and you can hopefully apply that to the sound when you do mix. And then compare that with some measurements that you can take in the field, in the rooms as well.
Go, Jeff.
I think it's also really important to compare what you're producing against other things in a like genre or like system, so that you can you hear someone else's production and you can hear, okay, that sounds dull to me, and that's maybe because I'm older and I've lost some of my high frequencies. So when I create mine, I need to make sure mine sounds dull in a similar way. I don't make mine sound flat to me if I've lost high frequencies in my hearing, because it's going to sound bright to everybody else. So always comparing against other things in the world.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
And that's a great point also, Jeff. And that's something I frequently do is kind of set that reference. But Marty, are you saying that you're actually taking numbers, levels from what you're getting from the audiologist and trying to use that in your own EQ compensation? In other words, 2 dB higher in this frequency than normal?
Well, like Jeff was just saying, if I know that my high frequencies are missing, by a certain number of dB, which my hearing test chart will show, then I know that, as he just said, I don't want to mix it so it sounds right to me, because it'll sound bright to everybody else. I've seen hearing test response charts for people like my wife, for instance. She is missing like 8 to 10 dB at 2K, which is a key voice frequency for speech. And sometimes she has trouble hearing what's happening when we're watching TV. And so I have to translate for her. And you got to know what your personal response is and how to translate that to what everybody else is hearing.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, when you have access to an RTA, a real-time analyzer, do you prefer to use an RTA while EQing or use your ears first?
Jeff?
So we've kind of moved on from RTA, and I think Douglas means a spectrum analyzer. So an RTA was just certain third octave band run into meters, whereas a spectrum analyzer is a full FFT display. So kind of this, let's see if you can, you're not hearing anything, but you can see music playing, and you see frequency from low frequencies on the left to high frequencies on the right. So a lot of EQs will give you that in the display of the EQ, and it'll show you that the actual spectrum, so energy versus frequency in there. That's useful if there's particular, like in the case of that hum, it would tell me, am I seeing 60 and 120 and 180? We may see those peaks in there. It can help you narrow in on particular frequencies. But generally, I would say I use my ears first. Correctively, I might use the, spectrum analyzer tools, but musically doing creative EQ or making things fit together better in a mix, it tends to be ears.
Marty?
Yeah, so on the X32, in the EQ graph on the screen, it will also show an RTA. And I use the RTA mostly for room tuning before the event. But if I'm playing something back or if I hear speech, I can see what the frequency characteristic of that signal is. And that will just give me a mental visual image of what it should sound like, and then I can translate that. But during an event, the most useful way to do this is to have software that can compare the original signal that you're sending or that's coming from the microphone to what is being produced in the room. Because if you can compare the original signal to what the audience is actually hearing, and then look at what the difference between those two is, then that will give you a really good idea about how to apply correction in terms of frequency bands. And that's an FFT with dual channel application. So you have the original signal as a reference, and then you have your measured signal, and then you can make corrections accordingly.
Jeff?
And I'll just say, especially like Marty pointed out, for these things that are consistent, and especially for post, I don't know how well this would serve you live, but this is, for example, this is an example of where I was trying to find some hum, and just to illustrate how you can see that as I'm zooming in on the frequencies, we see these two very now noticeable horizontal lines.
And this is a spectrogram, like as opposed to what we think of. Oftentimes we think of as an RTA. RTA
Yes.
is the kind of levels. This is a much higher resolution picture of the image,
and turn sideways over time, right?
Yep.
So, and then if you look at these lines, sure enough, here's one at 120. And here's one at 60, very consistent as opposed to everything else. So it's good for seeing patterns like this, something that you can clearly notch out. And then, of course, also little individual blips of stuff.
and I use spectrograms all the time. so I have them opened all the time. When we do live events, I might have 10 rooms up and I can see those bands. Like I can look over at a room and just go, that has a ground loop, and without having to listen to it. And it's a really, powerful tool in my opinion. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff, before you leave that, will you go up under the window and show the spectrum analyzer? I think it's under the window menu.
Yes.
Yeah.
See if you get it. Do you see that?
Yep. So that's the same piece of audio. Again, this is not real time. This is a recorded piece of audio that he's looking at. And you can see how with the resolution there, it's hard to pick out that 60 and 120 hertz bump. But looking at it over time in the spectrograph, we see that 120 and that 60 line that just follows all the way through that whole thing. So different tools are helpful to see different insights.
And especially,
and of course, I'll just say notching out things on EQ, it's very helpful for that. And then to what Alex is talking about, then the black belt is actually editing out things with using the spectrogram or spectrograph editing.
Which Audition, I think, lets you do, or what Adobe used to let you go in there and just circle things inside of that spectrogram. And we use it a lot live so that we can see it. And we have all of these open. Like I have, usually 5 or 10 meters. I'm a meter fiend when it or scope fiend when it comes to audio and video scopes, because it's what's important is looking at these while you're working. You'll start to triangulate what that means. You'll hear something and you'll see something and you'll start to understand what that looks like with what you're hearing. And as you triangulate that connection, you can just look at things and understand what's going on. Go ahead, Marty.
Spectrograms are also very, very useful for finding resonances when you're working live with speakers in a room. Resonance can be just something that just rings out. It doesn't feed back, but it's like pre-feedback. So it'll be a certain tone that rings out when somebody hits a certain pitch in their voice. And trying to zero in on that particular frequency to notch it out is very easy to see on a spectrogram.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway. In which situations should you boost frequencies with an EQ as opposed to cutting them?
Go, Jeff.
Well, the silly answer is if you want more of it, you boost it. If you want less of it, you cut it. We learn early on as audio engineers, hopefully early on, hopefully it doesn't take us a long time, there's a thing called mix creep, that as we're mixing lots of tracks together, we tend to hear, oh, the guitar's too low, so I push up the guitar. And now there's, that's covering up the voice, so now I push up the voice. Oh, now the drums are too far back, so we push up the drums, and everything seems to get, all the faders creep up, fader creep, everything gets louder and louder. The same thing happens with EQ, that we tend to listen and go, oh, it needs more of this, it needs more of that. But hopefully as we get more experience with this, as we listen to mixes, we don't have fader creep. We go, oh, it's not that I need more guitar. It's that the hi-hat is too loud and it's covering the guitar. And I pull out the things, reduce the things that are too loud. And the same thing with the EQ. We find the stuff that is problematic. So in that kick drum example, all those low mids that kind of didn't sound great. In Marty's example about the room, when we have that resonance of a person speaking and that their low frequency energy, the way it's ringing in the room with the speakers, as they talk, their low tones just kind of ring on longer. Those are the things we're going to zero in on cutting. And then if we're lacking intelligibility, if it's a lapel mic that's down and, maybe is a little off axis, we might boost a little bit of high frequencies to get that clarity that we need. So it's always a balance between the two of cutting what we want to get rid of. And that's really where to start first and then boosting what we need.
You go, Marty.
Right. So if you remember back from Jeff's first session, what an equalizer does is level over frequency, is the ability to change level at certain frequencies. And so, mix creep can happen inside of an equalizer. You're listening to something and you say, well, this voice isn't quite crisp enough. It's not clear enough. So let me boost up the high frequencies. That would be additive EQ. But more experienced people will first think about subtractive EQ. It's like, okay, so this voice is not very crisp. What is it having too much of? Is it too thick in the middle? Is it bassy that's masking the high end? And try and find that problematic area and bring that down. And now you're not increasing the overall volume of the track as you would if you were using just additive EQ. And things will fit much better in your mix.
Good, Bill.
Also, it's been weird because I'm a video guy, particularly when I was working on music videos. There's also a connection psychological thing. If I'm cutting to a guitar player, I am suddenly hearing that guitar more than I did before. If I cut over to the bass player, I am suddenly hearing the bass line more than I was before. It's the weirdest thing because you know that the actual mix has not changed at all, but your brain is so sophisticated that you can key in on particular players based on whether you're seeing that player in action. That was kind of a big aha for me. I'm not always mixing purely for the sound. Sometimes I'm mixing for that combination.
Good. Courtney?
Yeah, and if you're trying to match microphones, like if you have a microphone that's a lavalier and it's on a feature film, so it's hidden, it's underneath clothing, that's going to remove a lot of the high frequencies. So you have to compensate for that if you're going to try and transition from an overhead boom microphone, which is not buried under clothes, to a lavalier microphone. You may have to boost the frequencies of the lavalier to compensate for the fact that it's buried under a couple of layers of cloth. And you might want to roll off some of the low end too, because it's a little more chesty sounding in the lavalier than an open microphone.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from James Brooks. When EQing, do you prefer to bump the frequencies or notch the frequencies? That's essentially the same question we just had, I think, isn't it?
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, it's kind of the same question, though I would say that generally notch as a notch EQ is a repair function that's going to take out a very narrow band of frequencies. So what we're typically doing is boosting, that's the bump, or we are cutting with a peak EQ.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy, back from Tromsø, Norway. Can you discuss the differences between parametric, graphic, and shelving EQs, and when you might choose one over the other?
Jeff?
Sure thing. So we talked about this. If you want to go back for super detail, go back to our previous episode on EQ. But basically, leaving out the notch, which is a very surgical function, we tend to have three types of filters or EQs. We have the extremes, which are high pass and low pass filter. So those happen down here at the extremes. This is a high pass or a low cut. And up at the top end, we have a low pass or a high cut. And then also at the extremes, we have a shelving filter. And a shelving filter, remember that, sorry, before I leave the high pass and low pass, those are attenuation only. They are a low cut high pass. Then we get shelving filters, which are closest thing that lay people think about as a bass and treble control, because the low shelf goes from a frequency, so this is set to 100 hertz, there's kind of 100 hertz, all the way down to the extreme, and then a high shelf does the extreme high frequencies from a particular frequency up to 20 kilohertz, and this allows us to boost or cut an entire range of frequencies, so those are shelving filters. And then we have a standard peak EQ or bell EQ, which has a center frequency. It has an amount of boost or cut, and then it has a Q or bandwidth that allows us to change its narrowness or broadness, how wide a range of frequencies it affects. When you speak about a graphic EQ is many, 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 many bands of peak EQ. And each of those bands has a fixed width and has a fixed frequency and has just a slider that does boost or cut. And so we'd have those set, maybe say third octave bands, and you'd get 31 of those in a graphic EQ.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How many nodes are needed for a given task? When may you need more adjustment nodes, and when may having too many levers to pull distract you from your overall goals? Jeff?
Typical musical EQs tend to be 4 bands of parametric EQ, maybe 5 plus high pass and low pass filters. So, a 6 or 7 band EQ totally. That would be called a 6-band parametric EQ, because the primary peak EQs have 3 parameters. So that's what we call a parametric EQ. Getting into actual system tuning, where we're going to try to deal with resonances in a room, or maybe match the sound of several loudspeakers in a surround setup if we have not been able to purchase the same model, then we might need more bands that are more accurate.
Marty?
So the least number of filters, which you're calling nodes, we actually refer to as filters, the least number you can use is better. Because every time you adjust an EQ, you boost or cut, you're also changing the phase characteristic of that signal. which is how EQ works. And if you use too many filters, boost, cut, especially, if you find that you're boosting on one filter and the immediately adjacent filter you're cutting, or you're dramatically boosting like a series of filters, then something's not right. Reset everything and think a little bit deeper about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. What is there too much of? What is there not enough of? And try and be more surgical about your EQ.
Next question.
David Brady, New York City. In a nutshell, how does one get started in EQing a room to eliminate resonant feedback and so forth? I've seen it done, but I can't grok the procedure.
Jeff?
So what we're getting is we have open microphones and open speakers. And so there's a certain amount of gain you can get before feedback. And if a particular frequency is resonant in that room because of the frequency response of the microphone, because of the placement of the microphones and the speakers, because of the placement of the speakers in the room, because of the size and shape and acoustics of the room, because of the frequency response of the speakers, many factors, a certain frequency may be more resonant and therefore feedback sooner. And so cutting that frequency can help that. Is it the best tool? No. We'd love to treat the room. We'd love to get flatter frequency response speakers. We'd love to, we can play with time, but oftentimes the EQ is the tool that we have available and is the tool that is fast. We don't have time to bring in acoustic treatment for the room to deal with the resonance there. We don't have time to rebuild the room with non-parallel walls. So all we have, it's kind of that if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, EQ is there, and it can help the problem, even if it's not the best tool for that. Some people will raise the gain until you begin to get the resonance of that. So you excite the room with something with all frequencies, and you hear the frequencies that resonate, and you begin to dip those, and then you can increase the gain of that microphone. I'm sure Marty's got more to add to this topic.
I oftentimes, when I walk into a facility, I can tell you who won the argument, because there's the architect and the designer and the audio engineer, the audio engineers, and I can immediately walk in and just tell you the architect won or the audio engineer won, because you'll see these rooms that look a little odd, or even in even event rooms, these big stages, and you'll see things in there and you realize that there was this, and every once in a while you see both sides winning, where they obviously spent, but that's not by accident. If you walk into one that looks like that, it means that there was a lot of meetings, and a lot of design and a lot of simulation to get to a place where both sides were happy. It's really an amazing thing. And I think it's very underestimated, when people look at building the next event center or conference room or other things like that. Usually they just build a box and make it shiny. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I'm convinced that acoustics is not a required course in architecture school.
Oh, man.
So there are many different aspects to tuning a room. There's the frequency response of the loudspeakers themselves, and then there's how the room is reacting to those loudspeakers. So, first thing we'll do is evaluate the loudspeakers themselves by getting a microphone fairly close to the speaker, putting pink noise through them, measuring the output, and then trying to flatten that out. That gives us a baseline. Then we'll pull the microphone back into the room in several different places, and using pink noise again, we'll measure the responses and see how the room is changing that frequency response, and comparing different points in the room, because acoustics is not consistent from one point in a room to another. Then there's things that happen in a room that are called reflections. I will, after tuning a room, what I'll do is play pink noise through the speakers, and then I'll walk up, this is in like a corporate conference, I'll walk up onto the stage to where the various people are going to be sitting, or where the panelists are, where the podium is, and I'll listen to what I'm hearing from the speakers bouncing off the various walls. And I'll find that I can hear a high frequency reflection when I'm standing in a certain place, or a low frequency reflection. And if that happens to be where a microphone is, I know that that particular location is going to be more prone to feedback or ringing. And sometimes it's as easy as just re-aiming the speakers a little bit, just so that the reflection changes and the stage gets a little quieter.
Courtney?
Yeah, very good explanations. Thanks, guys. The tuning a room, a lot of times you're dealing with the room's resonance and standing waves. And a standing wave is caused when one frequency, the dimensions of the room equal a certain frequency. And here's a good demonstration of it. The red and the blue, which are the smaller waves that aren't changing amplitude, are changing in time as they're bouncing off different things. And when they line up, because of the distance between the speaker and the walls or the walls from each other, they generate that red frequency, which is a standing wave, which accentuates that frequency by several dP. So to eliminate the standing waves or the resonance of the room, you need to find out what frequencies have standing waves in the dimensions of that room, and then equalize them down a little bit to eliminate the boost in those specific frequencies that's happening in that particular room.
Good, Marty.
Yeah, and very good, Courtney. I'm glad you mentioned that. But if you bring that graph up again, you'll see that, yes, there are times when certain frequencies are boosted, but there are also times when certain frequencies completely disappear, right? So there's nodes and modes. So a mode is when they increase, and a node is when they decrease. And that's caused by interference, completely canceling out when they're 180, when the reflections are 180 degrees out of phase with the original signal, they completely cancel out. And that can happen at different points in the room. Like I've been in rooms where I'll play a 250 hertz tone, for instance, through the loudspeakers, and I'll walk around, and in certain seats, it's really loud, and like 3 seats away from that, completely silent.
Next question.
Next question comes from Josh Kaufman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. What is the common vernacular of EQ? And can you give examples, things like flat, bright, muddy, warm, and so forth? Are there cases of confusion due to colloquial terminology versus universal terminology? Do new applications bring updated terminology?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of terms, and some of them have positive connotations and others have negative connotations. You know, warm is an increase in low mids that's good, and maybe muddy is an increase in low mids that's bad. Somewhere I snagged this wonderful little chart. So we have frequency across the bottom. Right above that, you see kind of a general categorization into 5 ranges. And then above that, there's what we were talking about with a graphic EQ. Those would be the peak EQs that are on a 31 band 3rd octave equalizer. Those are standard frequencies. And then above that, a bunch of other terms. We've got rumble and thump and warm and punch and whack and crunch and air and edge. Are these well defined? I would say no, they're general areas that people can talk about. You know, I want it to sound a little more green. I've heard that before.
Go ahead, Marty. I can't hear you, Marty. There you go.
Okay, so the document that I referred to earlier called the 9 EQ pivot points, if you do an internet search, you'll find YouTube videos, you'll find the document from Michael Curtis, otherwise known as Produced by MKC, and he will describe these ranges as like 1 to 50 hertz is depth and weight, 100 hertz is warmth and punch, and there's thickness and mud, boxy and gargle, nasal and knock, edge and clarity, presence and bite, sizzle and snap, and air and plastic.
There you go.
I encourage you to look for it.
And it is important to know what these are in a sense of they are colloquialisms, but a lot of people use them. and so you really have to be talking to someone and think, I feel a little warmer. I want it to be warmer. And you got to know what that means. Next question.
Next one comes to us from James Brooks in New York. Do you consider the voice ISO tool in Resolve part of the EQ process? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I consider every effect we use part of the EQ process, and some affect them more than others. I mean, one that's a standout for me is occasionally if I add a D reverb, if it's like an interview that was done, to a normal person who's in a normal room that's got a ton of reflections and who knows how far away the mic is, it dramatically changes the entire sound quality of that person. So you have to make sure that the bottom line, whatever you're going to do to that audio, that you then EQ in that final step to make sure that the final product sounds how you want it to.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofso is back from Tromsø, Norway. When live streaming and compressing audio using codecs like H.264 or H.265, how should one adjust their EQ strategy to maintain optimal sound quality?
Jeff?
I don't have a specific direction for you because it's listen to it after the compression and see if you need to change your EQs that you've done in the process of getting there.
And as a note, H.264 and H.265 are generally considered video formats, and so you're really looking at AAC or MP3 is the format for the audio. The one thing to look at is you can get a lot of errata over about 8 to 10K that goes up to 20K, and a lot of times I roll that off at about 10 or 12K. I roll it off, and the reason for that is that you'll get little air hits. And when it gets very low volume and you hear that, you'll hear this, because a lower compression rate. So if you're at like 64K per channel, which is a 128, which is very common, when you get down into those areas, you'll start to hear it hitting, and it's usually living up in that area there, and it just doesn't know what to do with it, and it just comes out as little pops. And so a lot of times if you roll that off, you'll avoid some of that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says iZotope Neutron has an unmask feature which helps resolve frequency masking issues between two signals. When can this be advantageous versus manual EQ? And he's got a link there.
Jeff.
So the one thing that we've done today, which is probably an EQ mistake, is we've been doing everything EQing in isolation. And so if it's a single voice, that's fine. But if it's a kick drum that's going to blend with a bass guitar that's going to blend with guitar and vocals and overhead mics and keyboards, then we need to actually listen to that in context. And so that kick drum, one of the things that I was pulling out of that is a room for the bass guitar and the electric, distorted electric guitars to fit in there. And so I think that's what I haven't used the Neutron Unmask feature, but I'm assuming that's what it's doing. Masking is a thing that happens in the human ear. It's the stuff that goes into what Alex was talking about, AAC data compression, is that it assumes that you can't hear something that is being masked by something else, and so we're throwing away data. But sounds do mask other sounds. A loud sound at a particular frequency will mask sounds around it. So EQ is one of the methods that we use to make lots of instruments fit together in a mix. We let each of them sort of have their own frequency range. And so we might pull out low end of a guitar. It would make the guitar sound very thin, to use those terms, in isolation. But once it's in the mix with the bass, the guitar doesn't sound thin anymore. It actually prevents the bass from being muddy by those low frequencies of the guitar.
Good, Marty.
Right. So when we're mixing music, we want to be careful that when we want to be able to distinguish certain instruments in the mix, it has to have its own place in the frequency spectrum and not be masked by another instrument that happens to occupy the same frequency spectrum. They blend together, and then you can't tell which one is which, and you can't hear either of them. So we sometimes mix by frequency division. where the lead vocal has its own place in the frequency spectrum, and we'll kind of scoop everything out that also occupies that frequency range, just by a little bit, enough for the voice to stand out. Now, the way that Neutron works is by side chaining. So we can scoop out things with an EQ, but they will always be scooped out, right? So when you do side chaining, what you're doing is activating that EQ filter and the reduction in that frequency when something else happens. So with side chaining, you've got, with standard EQ, you're working on the original signal. With side chaining, you can activate the EQ with a different signal. And so in the case of classic cases, kick drum and bass guitar. So they occupy the same frequency range. But when the kick drum hits, side chaining can duck the bass guitar just by a little bit so that you can hear the attack and the ring of the kick drum. And as soon as that's over, the bass guitar comes back in. And you don't even notice it because the frequency response doesn't change because the kick drum is filling in that same frequencies.
Thanks so much. Great hour. Thanks to Jeff for doing all that prep, for this hour, and making sure that we've had some stuff to listen to. And I think it just makes such a huge difference to hear those examples and walk through those. We talked a little bit about it, and we just realized that we really needed to have that. And Jeff, really, thank you so much for putting the work in to make that happen. And thanks to everyone else here, all the panel, Jeff and Courtney and Marty and Bill and John and Chris. It's really, really great to have I think this conversation, it started off a little, I was like, I don't know if we're going to get a lot of questions. And then of course we went over, we had to send back like 6 or 8 questions. If I sent those questions back, remember that you can bring those in on another day. If you see, I would wait for another Wednesday to bring those back in. So when you have these audio questions, we've got a lot of audio experts that you can see here that have a lot of experience. And a lot of times we're having them come in on Wednesdays. Wednesday is our audio day. So save some of those questions in your in your account in Mukana and bring those back in and ask those questions. You don't have to give up on them. Just put them in the first hour for another Wednesday. So, but really, really great hour. So just thanks to everyone on the panel. We can't do this without you. And it was just a really exceptional hour. And thanks to the producers who asked all these questions and made sure that we were able to move through both the first and the second hour with a great conversation. We really appreciate everything you do here. And then finally, thanks to the incredible team. There's a team that is now figuring out where we're moving. We're moving all our gear. We're figuring out where it goes. We had a great meeting with the dev team to figure that out, and they pulled me back a little bit. I was like, we can do all this stuff, and they're like, it's a little work. And so anyway, so we're pulling. We're going to figure this out. So there may be a little slowdown there as we go through that, but I just really appreciate the patience and the hard work from our team on the back end, the dev team. The production team that's actually making this happen every day, the management team that's figuring out what we're going to talk about. Remember, we do this, figure out what to talk about 20 times a month. It's just an incredible thing that we've built here together. So thanks to everyone for all of that. We traveled, I see, I didn't get my thing. We traveled 72,000 miles today, 116,000 kilometers. And that is 571, I just got that off the top of my head. Oh, wait, no, I got it off the chat. 571 million bananas for scale. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you in after hours. Oh, that's great.
Alex, did you find a new place?
We have a variety of options. I am going to go look at, I'm touring the record plant in Sausalito today. So we'll see if that might be. Yeah.
I was thinking immediately, I want to see Alex's diagram of what he wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just, it turns out John Wallace has a near copy of what we do here. And I was like, we can move it in 2 weeks. And the team was like, we can't. So I was like, we will do something simpler in 2 weeks, and then we'll work with John on that. So that's good. That's why we have meetings and negotiation. All right. Thanks everybody.
Jeff, thank you. Great hour.
Indeed. Bye-bye.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank y'all.